Welcome, dirty peasants, to Wartwood Gazette, the Amphibia podcast. I'm your host, the Maticon, and join me today we have Nick.
Hello.
All right, this week's recording is 3 tips for season 2 discussion. Last time it was season 1, this time it's season 2. The next one, I think, is kind of obvious. News this week, nothing, because we discussed the news for us half an hour ago. For you, it was 2 weeks ago. Because this is also October 6th. So we'll go right into the points that we have for these 3 tips that we think might improve discussion surrounding season 2. Just a quick breakdown. The first point's going to be this is not the season where it gets good. Second point, start discussion with the journey, not the destination. And third point, season 2 is a deconstruction of the isekai genre. So I guess starting with the first point. So Nick, why do you hate season 2? How come this isn't the season where it gets good?
Yeah. I mean, it's again, it's the unfortunate. Like I think is like what is that thing like people say like when a show came out too soon or it was ahead of its time. I feel like a lot of people they do break down media through trends, right? Or they'll only see things in a vacuum based on the current trends they're aware of currently. And I think Amphibia is just its own original story doing its thing. It is not, I guess, yeah, you could describe it as time. I I don't know either way. Like it's not thinking about how this cartoon is doing stuff or how this cartoon is doing stuff or what is the current trend. Like no, it is its own story that developed in its own way based on the necessity of the story, right? So when I'm checking out a YouTube review that promises to do the story justice, and season one is like 10 minutes long. The 2A gets like a 10-second summary. Like the first time 2A gets a 10-second summary. And they're probably like, okay, we got Marcy. Now the show's good. Now the show isn't messing around. Now the show's actually being a real show. It's nauseating, always seeing that stuff because again, it's ignoring. This is what I talked about in the previous episode. It's ignoring the deep meaning this show has always had, right? It's going for the easy way out of story is just when big things change. Like, no, that is all incorrect. You're not dumb, but you are wrong. That is my final take. That's my final take.
All right, all right. Thank you, Nick. And yeah, I do notice season 1 when everyone's discussing it is kind of this big blob of discussion. For season 2, there's a lot more segmentation between different parts of the episode, which is fine. It just means that like people are pulling from very like specific chunks when they talk about the season, especially season 2. And I feel like I might get into that for a second point, but going back to like the where it gets good idea, just don't say it. No, just because like yeah, the where it gets good is sort of like a dig at the show. It's like, oh, before this it wasn't that good or just was just there. And I mean, if you feel that way, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine opinion. But if you're trying to sell the show to someone, then you shouldn't bring that up at all. You should just say like this is how the season started or the season starts. And I think people have the right idea where because season 2 is where they leave the valley. I think a lot of people start off with saying, "Oh, season 2 is where they leave the valley and they explore the rest of Amphibia," and that's a really nice hook for people who felt a certain way about season 1 and are hoping to experience something different. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I think like it's definitely just like again, it's like the same. It's similar to the filler argument, right? Because it's just you know, darn it, I think yeah, you always got to lead with like what makes a show special. I feel like again, it's always just like it's either like the specific storytelling techniques he uses or just again, the meaning behind the work, right? Like where you can pull out the work, and I think like. Yeah, like no, but you have so much material of season one you can work with, right? Like you can say so many different things. You can say like, oh my God, they did this like mind blowing uh like what's the word between what was the word I was yeah, this mind blowing like dual relationship between Sasha and Anne, you know, Anne grew as a person while Sasha became worse. There's so much drama. Uh Sasha's the villain of season one, with only being in like 3 episodes. You know, there's like all these exciting things you can like pull out of the series instead of just, you know, focusing on whatever bullshit idea has been fabricated for you from a YouTuber. Like, like you have choices. You have choices.
and do you want to go into the next point?
Yeah, all
Okay.
set.
Yeah, and this is more the next point's more about the details where start when talking about season 2, start your discussion with the journey, not the destination. So Nick kind of touched on this idea earlier where when we see people make videos about Amphibia, in regards to season 2, the kind of mentioned a little bit at the beginning, oh, they leave the valley and then we meet Marcy, and there's a very large chunk in between those two points. Leaving the valley, reaching Marcy. That's episode 1 to 6. That's a third of season 2 basically. And I just think people like sleep on these episodes like a lot. Like I don't want to get too much into the details of every episode, but you do kind of see the Anner Beast, no, sorry, not Anner Beast, the Handy Ann, Fort in the Road, a lot about. Uh, I'm trying to remember the name of the Sasha episode. Toadcatcher, and then Marcy at the Gates, and then I noticed people later on will mention the Gravity Falls not crossover homage episode, Wax Museum, sort of like not in relation with the journey to Utopia, but just in regards to season 2 in general, or even as like its own sort of thing. Like people will mention Amphibia and just mention, oh, there's a Gravity Falls homage episode, which is fine. But it's important to kind of point out that the trip to Utopia is sort of a way of like having our characters already kind of it sort of tests their I don't want to say test their bonds, but definitely because they're on the road, it gives like a new kind of context to their dynamics while on the trip. Like the typical like road trip sort of arguments and sentiments where you're like in a little enclosed space for so long, or you're with a bunch of people together for so long that eventually you'll get on each other's nerves. I think that's just like a great little thing that happens with the planners while they're on this trip. And I will say that this is probably the most journeying, the most like when I think about like an adventure, like a typical standard adventure where you go to a new place and whatever. This this trip to Utopia, I think feels like the most kind of like it embodies kind of the most like adventurous part of the series because like it's not just going from point A to point B. They're sort of just like stopping by at some places and meeting new people, and it's fleshing out the world like quite a bit. And you do have episodes like Quarrelers Pass where there's a very significant detail regarding the Olms and their city underground, that area. And that's fine too. But just the small things like meeting other people outside Frog Valley does play a huge part of expanding the world that you don't really get later on in the series once you have stuff like Joe Sparrow sort of flying everyone where they need to be. So I just think it's really important for people to sort of like when they talk about season two to take the time to sort of like bring this up before you start into the before you start talking about the other stuff that happens later in the season. Because the gem
Yeah.
yeah, because like
Oh,
the temple quests don't really have that sort of like same kind of traveling experience that this first half before Marcy of the Gates does.
and it's, I don't know, it's funny. I think it's funny, yeah, because I think we brought it up before. It is funny how that's just like ignored by the fans because we get the trio. So everyone's like, yeah, it doesn't matter, you know, we got the trio, we got the Sasha and Marseille, Sasha and RC drama. Like it's funny, but I think it's just yeah. I think I mean again, this is why I'm on this podcast. Because I always love all the points you bring up about the show and about just how everything works with it. Like I think it's like if you because again, you know, if you can't see the value in because then again, you're just missing out. And talking about the show always makes me want to go rewatch it. Like you're I don't know, you're missing out on how massive this journey is for the Plankett family. You know, because there's so many things so many different points I can make right now, but just obviously, you know, one of them is just how Anne's union with them just changes everything for them, right? Like they're experiencing things they never would have without her. Like she is their conduit, right? Like she's the guiding star. Like she gets them going out of their simple lives, and like yeah, and additionally with that, like you know, Sprig, he always wanted a bigger life than what he was getting in Wartwood, right? Like he always wanted to explore. Like you know, Polly, like yeah, she's the baby, man. I don't know, she's the baby. She's getting up there. She's getting out there. You know, it's cool. Like it's honestly, I think something very obvious is that you know, as it was explored in Truck Stop Polly, I think like yeah, honestly, yeah, with Sprig. I was like, damn, I can go to the specific things, but like it's just we're getting to like sure the development itself might not be massive, but we're getting to explore these characters in different ways. We're getting like these new stories, like these first few two A episodes, like they're very special to me. Like I love stuff like Toadcatcher and Marcy at the Gates, but like just these episodes that like is again, it's like these type of episodes that also remind me of why the show is so special. Like it like I think Matt broke it down himself, but like yeah, the structure is very similar to a JRPG, right? Like it has different intentions with how it utilizes it's like, you know, how you utilizes it's you know, uh it's plot. I'm just gonna say it's plot. Like and start using the words that other people use. It's yeah, honestly, I feel like I know I'm going on for a very long time, but it's just like y'all, y'all, if you're struggling, think about what the show is trying to tell you. I'm not saying you're supposed to like it, but I think a problem is I see like a majority of takes, it just sounds like you're not getting what the show's trying to do at all. Try to look at it through that. And I promise you, like 9 out of 10 times, I've seen more people than not suddenly go from thinking the show is okay to loving it. As soon as you get what it's trying to do, there is a very high chance you'll love it.
All right, thank you, Nick. And I guess we can go into the last point that we had, and that's this is a little bit more subjective. So, season two is a deconstruction of the isekai genre. Now, to be frank, I don't watch a lot of anime. I just come with the understanding that this fish out of water story going to a new place like that's the kind of the fish out of water phrase. That's what I'm more familiar with. Season 2, you can argue that all of Amphibia is a sort of twists the narrative that we see with most kinds of like fish out of water stories, especially with season 3 where they go back home. But season 2 I feel like it's the biggest sort of like contrast because of Marcy's inclusion. And because a lot of fans gravitated towards Marcy's character, there's a lot of story beats that happen where it doesn't feel as satisfying as Anne's. And I think it's important to remember that the point of Marcy's character is to sort of show like the unhealthy sort the unhealthy perspective of using like of escapism. And because this is sort of like Marcy's quote unquote season, and how much she sort of influences the plot, and not just like the whole like premise of the series with just by taking the music box, but once we get to Utopia, Marcy does a lot of like the heavy lifting in terms of like how to get back home, what to do, where to go through the gem quest. And Nick, you gotta help me out, but I just think that when you have Marcy's like the temple quest, it seems like people are very fond of those episodes. But looking back at them, they sort of were like set up as a way to drain the gem's powers and sort of like this very wonderful journey that season 2 sort of set up actually turned out to be sort of like it had like a negative intention of like shying away from responsibility. And I guess that doesn't really happen too often in stories where you have like a chosen one going out to do these quests to sort of like prove your valor. And even though the temples were kind of like had that kind of message, their whole purpose was to kind of like take that power away, right?
Yeah, no, I think no, because I think yeah, because darn, yeah, no, I agree. Honestly, when you brought this up, I was 100% with you. I was like, season two is a deconstruction of the East Sky Job. Like anything that normally happens, it deconstructs. I was like 100% with you there. But darn, it's also just yeah, it's also just such a difficult word to argue. But I'm gonna defend you there, Tom. I'm gonna be there no matter what. It's I think there's like a lot of ways you could break down season two and say like, hey, look at this common trope or happening in an isekai story, and this is bringing it like a very strong layer of reality to it. Because I think again, some guy in the comments probably gonna be losing their mind over us potentially getting this word wrong, but it's like with deconstruction, I swear, you know, it can be it can you know damn, this is hard, but honestly, I'm just gonna say, yeah, I think like so with the Temple Quest, yeah, usually you just have this idea of a character. Again, okay, no, let's just dial it back. Let's bring it all the way back to the most basic idea, right? When a character gets isekai into another world, they meet the royalty then, right? And that royalty usually has an epic quest for them that they're going to go on. Right? And I think something that usually happens, or almost all the time, it's just that like the royalty and the hero, their goals are one. Like their goals are one to one. The royalty is just some guy who's going to kneel to the hero and do whatever whatever the hero wants, right? Like there is no real world consequences to this complete outsider with this huge political power suddenly joining the world. Like there like in those stories there are no real world consequences, but Amphibia was like, hey, wait, actually, you know, wouldn't this person want to take advantage of that? Wouldn't this person egg on that hero's escapist fantasies? Like, wouldn't that hero wouldn't like that royalty just like take advantage of them for their own political gain? Right? Like they won't like they aren't just an NPC. Like they aren't some mindless NPC. Like they have their own autonomy here. They're going to try and do something here. So I think like yeah, you obviously have that. Like Marcy, she's a very real. Like someone I'm sure someone will be able to point out these kind of protagonists that maybe they do suffer from the pains of being whisked away from their own world. Like I don't know, like shout out to Digimon, I guess. But I think, but if you paid attention in recent times, we've had isekai after isekai after isekai where it's like the most bland. And I listen, disclaimer, I love anime, but uh, but that also means if I love anime and I have those high standards of what I like about anime, it means I gotta be on about what I think are pieces of crap. All those bland ass black haired main characters where it's like I got reincarnated as a swimming pool, I got reincarnated as a jacuzzi, I got reincarnated as a hot spring, I got reincarnated as a vending machine, I got reincarnated as a wand, I got reincarnated as a sword, I got like all that bullshit, all that bullshit, all that bullshit. It is 100% just some wish fulfillment fantasy garbage. Like there's no redeeming meanings behind the text. It's just pure filler for the soul. Like it's nothing. But in Amphibia, they're like, no. Marcy's problems that she tried to avoid in the real world, they're gonna follow her over here. She's not gonna be able to escape them, and they're going to seemingly ruin everything. Like it's a very real demonstration of how this could work in real life. But based on what's come before, I think that's the key. I think deconstructions they have to be like heavily based on the text around them. I think that's why it can be so. I think that's why it can be so like hard to find specific examples of deconstruction that are valid because it's like What if something's just like a well-written story, right? And it's like, yeah, something well-written, it will, if something's well-written, it will pull out consequences of something that, you would assume would happen, right? But so just not to make this point go on any longer than it needs to, but I think it's just, yeah, I mean, I think Marcy is a deconstruction of these protagonists. I think like season two as a whole, the whole journey, you could argue it is as well. And from being even more daring, maybe we could say Anne. Who knows? Because again, it was very important to Matt Brawley not to have Anne just teleport to this world and suddenly just love it, right? Like she had to go from like, maybe it's not deconstruction, but she definitely had to go from just like, I think she's definitely a unique protagonist. I could see Anne being the troublesome, like Anne could be the dumb. No, Anne could be the oh, this is how Amphibia's a deconstruction because Anne, she's the isekai protagonist, but she doesn't like Amphibia. Well, which is like, no, I think it's more of like an interesting take on the genre than a deconstruction. Deconstruction is, it is a very self-aware, hey, look at all these tropes, these conventions. What if we added a dash of reality to it, or what if it was more like this or something, right? Like, so I just want to put that out there on top of just saying again, repeating that point. Season two is a banger of deconstruction of these guys.
Thank you, Nick. And yeah, I like how you brought in Anne because like a lot of fans liked what Marcy brought to the series. And I think it's important to note why isn't Marcy the main character of the show? Like why do you have why is Anne the main protagonist instead of Marcy? And you kind of have to contrast what they went through in the season where you have a season of Anne sort of learning to love Amphibia and how she connects with the people. And a couple of the episodes with Marcy attempting to do the same thing for the wrong reason. I think there's a really interesting contrast there with episodes like Maddie and Marcy and New Wartwood, where we see Marcy's attempt to belong in Amphibia. And it doesn't really have the same sort of sincerity as Anne, where Anne sort of has to learn to live with the people before she becomes one of them. And one of our other co-hosts, Impact, I like how he mentioned how you can't really to understand Amphibia, you need to sort of talk about you need to sort of understand all the girls and what they contribute to the story to understand the whole story of Amphibia itself. And I've been kind of guilty of this where I kind of focus more on Anne than Sasha and Marcy. But then by understanding Sasha and Marcy and what they add to the significance of Anne's journey is very important. And in this case, Marcy is kind of showing the importance of a character like Anne who doesn't really who needs to develop their own personality as opposed to someone like Marcy that's already very actualized as a character. And that's why it was so easy for her to kind of slip into the show almost midway into the series. But I just think it's important when you discuss this season, like season two, to sort of wrap up. Season two is, I think, a lot of people's favorite season. So you don't really have to kind of I don't think you'll really encounter a situation where you have to like kind of argue for it the same way people would need to for season 1 or 3. I think it's just important to sort of actually the way I'm kind of thinking about this is, oh, you need to remind people that like season 2 is not sort of like a deviation from the core story of the show for the better. It's just like another. It's just an extension of the story that the show is trying to tell in terms of like because it's like the middle half and they get to sort of like tease a lot more mysteries. Season 2 kind of has the luxury of not needing to like pay off, but still sort of like building off of season 1. So like it does have that. It kind of rides that high a little bit in terms of like speculation and theories, and you can kind of like explode and not really have to deal with the fallout until later on in season 3 where you kind of need to start providing answers at the end of the show, which Amphibia does. And
Yeah.
and yeah,
It's
so honestly this video I feel
yeah,
like,
keep going.
oh yeah, this video is just more like we're trying to argue for like the parts of season 2 that aren't discussed as often, especially that like trip to Utopia stuff.
Yep.
And Nick, any final thoughts?
Well, honestly, besides I don't know, always talking about the show it just makes me want to go sit down and rewatch it. Like I was like in the middle of me talking, I was looking over just some of the artwork of the later of like 3D and like yeah, damn, I just forgot how much it pulled me in when I was watching for the first time. I don't know, this is I really do feel like this is am I gonna call this like the best cartoon of the 2010s? Like, I don't know. Like ranking stuff like that is very difficult, but I think like this is I think we're definitely reaching a point of cartoons where like the storytelling is maturing. The like the stories that are getting deeper, you're able to just have longer, more in-depth conversations about episodes, right? Like I think while Amphibia might have not gotten like the best hand from the community at the time, I do think the work and the effort is still there, and that's going to be immortal. And I do believe that its reputation is just going to gain more and more strength as time goes on, right? Because, yeah, because this always happens. Something gets, something might be ignored a few years ago, but then all it takes is just one clip caption, someone's like, wow, this is an incredible moment. I love what it means for the series, blah, 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 thousands of likes, and then there's a resurgence. That's what I believe is going to happen to Amphibia. So those are my final thoughts.
Well said. Thank you, Nick. And with that, that concludes this recording. Thank you for listening, and see you guys next time. Say goodbye, Nick.
See ya.
See ya.